age. We're not youngsters anymore. And sometimes we tell ourselves we're not up to speed on technology. But in reality, practically every one of you probably has a smartphone of some sort. And practically every one of you is probably using it to get information, whether it's to help your memory when you can't remember the name of that movie that you just saw last week, and you go, Siri, what was the name of that movie that person was in? And then Siri comes back and I need more information. But anyway, it's the whole development of this is moving faster and faster to that. I'm really sorry about this because the rest of it covers what I started to talk about earlier, but I wanted to show you some shots from this. We have I'm calling this the 501 project, where I'm reaching out to 500 cities, as I indicated. And what I'm finding is just a lot of interesting information out there. Have you ever heard of the city by the name of Ben Lomond? Okay, at least one of you has heard of Ben Lomond. Well, it's a little city of, I don't know, a couple of hundred anyway, down kind of the southeastern part of the state. And their claim to fame is that they are the 756,217th biggest city in America. So little things like that, just like, oh my God, I got to go to Ben Lomond now just because of that kind of moniker that they have put out there about themselves. There's a city council member in Stuttgart that approached me one day when I was at a conference of the Arkansas Municipal League, and I asked him, I said, stop by our booth, I want to get some information for some of you if you have anything creative or interesting you want me to cover. And this fellow came by, Jim Craig, and he said, well, in Stuttgart, said, we have a bird. And I thought, yeah, you got a lot of them. That's a big deal for duck hunting and all that. And he said, no, I'm talking about another bird. He said, we have a bird that winters at the airport in Stuttgart that comes down from Alaska and Canada every year, winters at the airport. And we have about 1,500 birders that come to Stuttgart every year, spend a few days there to see this bird and other birds in the area, but specifically for this bird, stay in the hotels, eat in the restaurants, and so it is a tourist attraction. And they know this because not only, if you'll talk to the hoteliers, they'll say, yeah, they stay in our hotels there, but also because they have a registry for them to be able to get on the airport property, so they have to do that when they're there. So that's one example. You've probably heard of Miller's Mud Pot down in Dumas. This lady down there who for years quietly but now internationally successful because she builds these ceramic art pieces, bowls and plates and all kinds of other things, and it's fascinating just to stop in and see her place. So there are hundreds of examples like this. You can go to some places like we were in Batesville just the other day, and I had a picture of here of me and Mark Martin, the NASCAR race driver. But Mark he called us and he said, I'm back, I'm retired, I want to do some things to help promote Arkansas. He's got a little museum there that's his whole story that's worth seeing and witnessing right there in Batesville next to his Ford dealership. And it's a fascinating story all the way from the time when he was about 13 and first started driving cars on the dirt track. His parents had to take him to the dirt track because he wasn't legal to be able to drive, but he could do the driving on the dirt track. So he's helping us promote Arkansas through his website, and we're working with him on that. But in addition, in Batesville, when you look around, a fascinating city, you have an old theater there, the Melba Theater, which is, they have just now completely restored and have it open now for second run movies, and been very successful, brings people from sometimes out of state to come to not only see this historic theater, but also to see a movie while they're there, and then probably stay in the hotels in Batesville. So little unique things like that. Batesville is also about 40 miles away from Jacksonport State Park, which Jacksonport is a very historic park, played a significant role during the time of the Civil War. Has an old courthouse there that's beautiful, but also has a wonderful new visitor center that'll be opening probably in the next few months. That if you go there sometime, I'd love to hear your first expression of how you like this visitor center, because when you walk up to it, most of our visitor centers are kind of like, they look like Arkansas. The logs are rock or something like that, very natural and native looking. This one looks like, something when you first look at it, you think it's one of the old flash cubes or something, because it's all glass all the way around. But when you listen to the architect and then finally you step back and look at it again, you see that he built this thing to look like a modernized version of an 1800s riverboat. And the way the roof and all overhangs and all, you can look at this thing and say, yeah. And at the same time, when you go into this thing then, not only is it a great place for the museum and for viewing the river and all the naturalness of Arkansas, but it's really a classy place. And so I'm sure it will probably be one of the most talked about visitor centers, just because it's not the traditional look that one would expect. But I think when people stop and realize what it's all about, they will also say, hey, this is pretty cool what the architect has done. Folks Stanley, who also, I guess they did the Axiom and a couple other things around. They are typically a little more edgy type of architect, but at the same time, this thing is really pretty special. Then hopping around the state, we have 52 state parks, as I said. So if I want to challenge you to one thing, if you haven't been to all of those, or if you've been to a few of them and you want to finish it out, at our ages, once I step away from this job, then, although I have an excuse to visit all the parks now, but at the same time, you can take a weekend, 52 weekends, you can hit them all. It's not that tough, and it would be worthwhile. There are some of the neatest parks going. Have any of you ever been to Old Washington State Park, which I had a picture of it here? Have you? A couple of you have been. Gil, when I first drove into Old Washington State Park about 5 or 6 years ago, first time I'd ever been there, about 8 miles off of the freeway, and I drove in there, and all of a sudden you're going down this little 2-lane road, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, what is this? It's like driving into Williamsburg or something. It's really incredible. And the old houses and buildings and jail and courthouse and even a restaurant there, it's the flavor of, the 1800s. In fact, Washington, Arkansas was the Civil War capital of Arkansas during the Civil War. Old Washington represents, that community in a sense. So it's worth visiting. Some of the other parks that I obviously love are our signature parks. We talked a little bit about that with one of you earlier, like Wilhelmina down at Mena, Mount Magazine, which is at the highest point in the state. Beautiful lodge and beautiful cabins, and just a beautiful place to view. Petit Jean, the oldest of our state parks, Mather Lodge and all, is something that's really special to be able to enjoy and to go to. One of the great spots that I think you will enjoy if you've not been there already is over in East Arkansas near Memphis, is Hampson Museum State Park. Opening soon will be the new visitor center and museum there. But in that area, right around there, you have so much to see. Wilson, Arkansas. Anybody ever heard of Wilson? Several of you have heard of that. Well, it's a place you would love to visit because, number one, you're right there on their square, which the buildings are all built after some sort of English Tudor style, where one of the wealthy family members who was farmers there, gin operators years ago, came back from Europe and decided the town needed to look like what he had seen in Europe. So it's really a cool town, wonderful restaurant there, great museum. And within the area, in addition to the museum, because there's so much Native American history there, you have the Parkin Archaeological State Park, and it's fascinating to visit, see some of the exhibits they have that are part of the digs out of the Native American, the mounds. And there's actually a piece of wood that they're trying to document now that was dug up out of one of the mounds there. They think might be, because it dates back correctly, it might be a piece of a wooden cross that was erected when DeSoto came through. Is it DeSoto? Am I getting it right? Came through Arkansas and went on to other places. So anyway, it's another interesting park to visit. And then right in that area, and as well, you have the Dice community. Anybody heard of that? Okay, a couple of you. Well, the most important name that you hear connected with the Dice community is Johnny Cash. The Johnny Cash Boyhood Home is just about a mile away from this Dice community, which was established in the Roosevelt era to go ahead and help lay out the land for farmers to get their start during the Depression. And Johnny Cash's family did that. The house is there, has been completely restored, and it's something just kind of spiritual in a way, almost going into. It's kind of like going to Mesa Verde or someplace and seeing the old early Anasazi ruins. Not quite that old, but when you go in there and you just think about the history of Johnny Cash and that you're standing in that house where these kids were raised and where he grew up, where he got his start playing music. And then over at Dice Community, they have a museum there as well, and they've actually taken wood planks from the original gymnasium and they've used it in part of the decor of the walls in the building there at Dice. So a bunch of fascinating things that are going on. So as I embark continually on this 501 project, I'll be having more and more stories that come up. I can see why Joe David Rice, who was before me, and he has a book coming out in September that's about quirky or interesting or unique places in Arkansas. I can see where he got, of course, he's a better journalist than I'll ever be, but in any event, he was, you could see he was collecting these things over 30 some odd years and basically has embraced that and embodied that in a book that the Butler Center is publishing that'll be coming out, I think it's in September if I'm not mistaken. He tells these kind of stories a lot more fascinating and a lot more interesting, I think, than I can tell them. But at the same time, as I get into it, it's incredibly enjoyable for me. I'm sorry we have a little mix-up with the technology today. I'm going to have to go back and work on that one to be sure that next round, because we just got this little projector, and I went and actually bought the connectors for it yesterday to hook up to my computer, and so here we are stumbling through it. But any of you have any questions for me? Yes. Yes, sir.
I'm not originally from Arkansas, but I'm from Illinois. But when I was doing some research on Arkansas, because my ex-wife and kids live in Mountain Home, I found that Mountain Home, Arkansas's claim to fame is that they have the second largest Walmart supercenter in the state.
That's probably true because that place is a retirement and visitor mecca. And of course, then with all the recreation around there too.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I can see why it would be a huge Walmart market. In fact, while I was with my brother-in-law at Flake and Kelly, we also put a TJ Maxx in there that has been a very successful operation up there too. Cassandra, you had a question?
I did. I work in state government, as you know, and is there, do y'all actually market to government organizations? I know you are one, but I'm saying, do you actually market to each department to kind of say when you have meetings, consider the state park area?
And the short answer is probably we do some, but not nearly as well as we need to.
We have we've been to Mount Magazine, Kettagene, a lot of different locations within the state, mainly because of the government rate as well.
Sure.
And it's beautiful.
Well, and I mean, you are a great, not only resource, but a great marketing add-on for us too. So if we make information specifically available to you and not just depending on you're getting it from, the places everybody else gets it, then I think that that's something worth considering. One of the things that I've always been a big proponent of is partnerships anyway. And this time on our website, for the first time ever on arkansas.com, there you can actually, I'm not saying you should, but businesses that are tourism related can actually put an ad on arkansas.com. And so that's a unique addition we're putting. Not only does it make a few dollars that we can push back into additional advertising, but it also gets them more of an upfront position when someone gets on arkansas.com, and if Bill Barnes at Mountain Harbor or one of the other resorts wants to get their presence a little stronger than our state parks, or at least up parallel to the state parks, then they can do it right there on arkansas.com. So, yes, sir.
You've been to Cotter and the bridge, White River.
Oh, I love Cotter, and
I grew up there.
Did you?
I grew up in Cotter.
Yeah. So did you know Mike Thompson and that family?
Dailey and Thompson.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a beautiful area. In fact, that whole Mountain Home, Cotter, that whole area is just, it's kind of, in fact, I worked as a tour guide at Bull Shoals Caverns back when I was in college. I sure did, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Do y'all coordinate anything with Game and Fish, or do they do any advertising for hunting, fishing?
Well, to the question is, do we coordinate with Game and Fish? And we do a little bit. We're working to try to do a better job of that. What I was going to say, that to me, even when I was mayor, working with North Little Rock, working with the county judge, what we did on both sides of the river, working together, is important. So we're reaching out. In fact, at our commission meeting just in Batesville a week ago, we had the Game and Fish had their commission meeting going on in town, and we had them over for part of that. We've met with the Highway Commission. We've met with AEDC. We constantly are working with AEDC. The governor is really interested in expansion of economic opportunity, industry, especially with China. And so we have actually partnered with AEDC to pay for a fellow who will be our representative in China that will help us to expand the Chinese market. You did make me remind me of one other thing, and I don't want to go too long over with you and keep you here when you're maybe sitting on the edge of your chair and ready to go do something else. But one of the other areas of great growth opportunity is the civil rights movement in the United States. Civil rights history is out of 11 countries making presentations at a recent conference in Denver. 8 of them said that civil rights history is one of the most mobilizing areas of interest for international travelers. And so we're working with Travel South